Welcome back to part 3 of my series covering the Constitution of the Freedom Founders of the United States. In this portion, we will be covering Article 1, Section 2, the formation of the Senate. The Senate of the United States shall be composed of 3 senators for each state, chosen by the citizens as ratified by the intercedent for 8 years, and each senator shall have 1. So right off the top, we can see some pretty deviations from the current Constitution of the United States. Here it's saying that instead of 2 senators per state, there's going to be 3 senators per state. And this is an acknowledgement that we come from quite a diverse set of people, and there is no state that's a monolith. Having 3 senators makes it just a little bit more difficult for any one political party or group to have a political monopoly in any one state. It says that they shall serve for 8 years instead of the current 6 years. We'll see in a minute, that actually doesn't mean that they get to serve for a longer time than they do now because of some of the limits placed on how long they can serve. And it does say that the intercedent is responsible for ensuring that the person running for office who received the most votes is the one who actually will be elected as the senator to represent that place. Immediately after the first election, they shall be divided into 4 equal classes. The seats of the senators of the first class shall be vacated at the expiration of the second year, of the second class at the expiration of the 4th year, of the third class at the expiration of the 6th year, of the 4th class at the expiration of the 8th year, so that 1/4 of the Senate may be elected every 2 years. So just like now, every 2 years, an equal part of the Senate is re-elected or elected. That will continue. Instead of being separated into 3 parts they are now for the 6 years, it's into 4 parts to cover the 8 years. So 25% instead of 33% is re-elected or elected every 2 years. Vacancies by resignation, death, or otherwise shall be filled by special elections called by the intercedent. So here again, we see the intercedent has more of the power and responsibility for calling elections and making sure that elections are run for any vacancies. No person shall be a senator who is less than 30 years old, has not been a citizen of the United States for 10 years, or who has not been a resident for 5 years of the state from which they are elected, and if such person has served 3 terms in any state or federal political position. So what this is saying, it's saying that you have to be 30 years old to serve as a senator at the time you were elected, and that you have to be a citizen of the United States for at least 10 years. And another article within this Constitution covers what is actually citizenship, because not everyone will be considered a citizen. There's also a class of people called non-citizens, and then there's another class of people that are neither citizens nor non-citizens. And then it also says you have to live in the state for at least 5 years that you're being elected to represent. So say you're being elected to represent Kentucky, that means you have to live in Kentucky for 5 years before you can run for the office of Senator of Kentucky. And then finally, it says that you cannot have had 3 terms in any state or federal political position. So if you served 3 terms in any state or federal political position, you're not eligible to become a senator in the United States Senate. So even though we've extended the timeline to 8 years instead of 6 years to be a senator, you still have very strong term limits. The Vice President of the United States shall be president to the Senate, but shall have no vote unless they be equally divided. So that's just like today. We've seen in the past couple of presidential terms, the Vice President running over to the Senate, casting the deciding vote for a bill or a law that's being voted on. It would happen just the same way. If the Senate is tied, the Vice President would cast the tie-breaking vote. The Senate shall choose their own officers. The intercedent shall choose the President pro tempore in the absence of the Vice President, or when such person shall exercise the office of the President of the United States. Just like the House of Representatives, the Senate is allowed to choose all of their own officers. If the Vice President isn't available to serve as the President of the Senate because no one's serving in the position of Vice President of the United States at the moment, or because the Vice President of the United States has assumed the duties and responsibilities of the President of the United States, then the intercedent will select a President of the Senate for the time period until Vice President of the United States once again becomes available. The Senate shall have the sole power to try all impeachments, must conduct such trials publicly with no portions taking place prior to sunrise or beyond sunset. When sitting for that purpose, they shall be on oath of affirmation. So this says that the Senate is the only portion of the government that can conduct impeachment trials, and all impeachment trials have to be completely public. They have to be available to the public, and they have to take place between sunrise and sunset so that the public can actually see them and take part in what's going on. The trial has to be conducted under the oath of affirmation. They have to swear an oath that they're going to act faithfully, honestly, with integrity, things of that nature. When the President of the United States is tried, the Chief Justice shall preside, and no person shall be convicted without the concurrence of 2/3 of the present quorum. So what this is saying is that if there is an impeachment trial of the President, the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court needs to preside over the trial, and nobody can be convicted without at least 2/3 of the present quorum, which is different than 2/3 of the Senate. So if half the Senate chooses not to show up, then, or a little bit less, as long as the Senate has quorum, if 2/3 of that quorum, 2/3 of the people present vote to convict, then there's a conviction. The responsibility of conviction in cases of impeachment shall solely reside with the Senate. The intercedent will have the sole responsibility of sentencing, which may not extend further than removal from office and disqualification to hold and enjoy any office of honor, trust, or profit under the United States. But the party convicted shall nevertheless be liable and subject to indictment, trial, judgment, and punishment according to law. So here we see more of that delegation to the intercedent. In this case, the intercedent is deciding what the fate of the convicted person is. The intercedent doesn't get to decide whether or not the person is convicted. That remains with the Senate. The intercedent is more or less the sentencing branch of government in this particular aspect. The intercedent says what happens, and it is limited in what can happen. The most that can happen is it can remove the person from office, kick them out of office, and say, hey, never be a politician or serve any office of honor, trust, or profit under the United States ever again. But even if they are removed from office, and even though the intercedent has that limit of only removing them from office, that doesn't mean that the person gets off free either. The law, or what the Constitution here is suggesting, is that the law is still the law, and prosecutors can still bring punishment to this person if they violated any law. The person can still be subject to civil litigation, be sued if that is appropriate for whatever they have just been impeached for. That concludes Article 1, Section 2 of the Freedom Founders Constitution of the United States. If you want to hear more, feel free to subscribe or follow this channel wherever you're seeing it. Thank you.